Hello, friends. On December 18th, a meeting of the Council of the European Union will take place in Europe, which President Zelenskyy will attend in person, as a decision on providing Ukraine with a reparations loan may be adopted there. Why do I personally have serious doubts about this? In Russia, a meeting of the Defense Ministry Board was held, essentially a board of killing, where Belousov said that they would continue advancing, and Putin stated that if the war is not ended through diplomatic means, they will keep pushing forward. Meanwhile, Putin's spokesperson Peskov said they are ready to discuss the deployment of European troops in Ukraine. In my view, this is an unexpected turn of events. What lies behind all this, and what new information am I ready to share with you now, beyond this announcement? Let's take a closer look. So please check your subscriptions. Those who aren't subscribed, I traditionally ask you to do so, and share this video with your friends and acquaintances via messengers. Post it on social media so that more people learn truthful information. I hope it is unbiased and as objective as possible. If you think it is, please write so in the comments. Now let's, friends, go into more detail. I'll start with one event that took place in Russia, the meeting of the Defense Ministry Board. Belousov, the defense minister of that country, the minister of killing of the Russian Federation, stated that the key task for Russia next year is to maintain and increase the current pace of the offensive, although the pace is indeed not as high as they would like. And now, as you can see, there are statements from both Ukraine and Russia that both sides are ready to fight. Therefore, when we hear about plans for war in 2026, it does not mean that everyone wants to fight. What does Belousov say? He claims that the policies of European countries and NATO create real prerequisites for continuing military actions in 2026. Belousov also emphasized that NATO is preparing for a military clash with Russia. Well, yes, NATO is preparing for a Russian attack on NATO. That is absolutely normal, but they try to present it differently, as if NATO were about to attack Russia. They themselves probably don't really believe it, but they spread such propaganda. What does Belousov say verbatim? "It is not we who threaten NATO, we are being threatened," he says. NATO's annual budget will increase by more than 1.5 times to $2.7 trillion. That's actually a good thing. It means Europeans will allocate $1.7 trillion, slightly more, for their own defense. That is a very good signal. Preparations by NATO's collective forces for an armed clash with Russia by 2030 have begun. Yes, Europe expects a Russian attack on European countries that are NATO members. And not only them. Russia's West grouping has taken Kupiansk, again taken it, although we know the situation there is not like that at all. Russian troops are repelling attempts by the armed forces of Ukraine to retake the city. He also says that we have lost nearly 500,000 servicemen, and that nearly 410,000 people joined military service in Russia under contract in 2025. 2/3 of them are under 40 years old. In fact, he confirms that a huge number of Russians are simply being used up at the front. In Ukraine, he says over 70% of thermal power plants and more than 37% of hydroelectric power plants have been disabled. Indeed, the situation in Odessa region is difficult. I have doubts about the percentages, though it is true that Ukraine's energy sector is in an extremely difficult situation. He also says that a security zone is being created in the Kharkiv and Sumy regions. The threat of our armed forces invading the Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk regions has been reduced, he says. We are probably not planning to enter there anyway. True, there was already an operation in Kursk region to reduce Russia's potential in other directions. And it also turns out that the Kremlin is ready to discuss the deployment of European troops in Ukraine. Peskov said this when answering a question about the possible deployment of forces of the Coalition of the Willing. We are indeed talking about European troops, not troops from China, South America, or Africa that could be part of a peacekeeping contingent in a demilitarized zone, but specifically about European troops in Ukraine. Western plans to deploy European troops in Ukraine to monitor compliance with a peace agreement could be a subject of negotiations, says Putin's mouthpiece. What does he say verbatim? Regarding foreign military contingents, here he seems to generalize not only European troops on the territory of Ukraine. And that, friends, is definitely not peacekeepers. Our position is well known, he says. It has been articulated by the president and at other working levels. It is consistent and clear. He hints that they are against it, but at the same time says that it is a subject for discussion. So, friends, the Russian side is leaving room for maneuver in negotiations. Peskov says one thing, Putin another, Belousov a third. This is a deliberate negotiating game. It is not some categorical position. This is my personal opinion. Please share yours as well. By the way, we just discussed this on air on Channel 24. A bit later, I'll leave that video here so you can watch it. Putin also spoke there and said that all the so-called goals of the special military operation would be achieved and fulfilled unconditionally. Russia, he says, can increase the pace of the offensive in Ukraine. Honestly, I strongly doubt that. If they could, they would have already done so. He also says that they did not start the war in 2022. Apparently it was aliens, but that the West started it. Maybe he meant provoked, but he said started. That is a lie. Then he says that Ukrainian statehood, judging by golden toilet bowls, is collapsing. Russians strongly exploit the topic of corruption in Ukraine. Unfortunately, it exists. He claims that European piglets joined the Biden administration in hopes of benefiting from the collapse of our country. They wanted to reclaim what they lost in previous historical periods and sought revenge. Russia, Putin says, will acquire, though I didn't quite understand where, new means of destruction that will not appear anywhere else in the world for a long time. Perhaps Ukraine is producing them. He also says that, as before, they are ready to negotiate and resolve all emerging issues peacefully. Again, friends, the same story. We will fight, but we want negotiations. While negotiations are ongoing, the war continues. That is Russia's position, but they do not withdraw from talks. Putin says the U.S. administration demonstrates readiness for negotiations. We hope the same will happen in Europe. It is inevitable. That is, Putin claims negotiations are inevitable, even with Europeans. He also says they do not insist on fulfilling promises allegedly made to them. Who made them, where, and when? I honestly can't say. He refers to public statements that NATO would not expand eastward and claims everyone ignored this. He often says that. Yet he launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. No such assurances were ever given to Putin. It was he and Xi Jinping who decided in 2022 to prevent NATO's eastward expansion. But once the full-scale invasion began, two countries, Finland and Sweden, joined NATO. Our cooperation with the alliance became even closer, and Europeans now unanimously say that Ukraine's security is part of Euro-Atlantic security, including that of the United States. And in the U.S., or increasingly loud voices say they are not going to abandon Ukraine. Although I now see many differing opinions like Putin won't wait for Trump. But it's not that simple, friends. Putin also said Russia allegedly prefers a diplomatic settlement of the war. However, if Ukraine and its partners refuse substantive talks, Moscow is ready to continue seizing territory by military means. He again promised to put the Arshnik system on combat duty by the end of the year. They just can't seem to get that Arshnik going. Apparently it's overgrown. He again speaks about eliminating the root causes of the war, as they call the conflict in Ukraine. They claim those causes supposedly don't exist. But if you think honestly, he contradicts himself, because by his own assertion he is fighting on Russian territory. On the territory of 5 regions he claims as part of the Russian Federation. And yet he says things aren't working out in Ukraine. In general, everything is as usual. Nothing new for us, just propaganda. Unfortunately, friends, it works. He again voiced the intention to create and expand a so-called buffer zone, as Belousov also mentioned. Nothing new, they repeated each other. Why do I say that the United States is interested in preventing the war from restarting and in preserving NATO's borders? Trump literally said just days ago, this statement wasn't very loud, that our task, as the White House administration states, is to prevent Russia from expanding westward. That is, there is no talk at all about restoring borders without NATO as of 1997. That was Putin's demand before the full-scale invasion. And today, the Telegraph writes that the U.S. may use weapons from NATO territory as part of security guarantees for Ukraine. Security guarantees are now actively discussed in Europe and the United States. This information is not yet confirmed, but it seems our delegation is already working in the U.S., which is why such reports are appearing. According to the developed plan, the U.S. will send a mission to Ukraine to monitor the ceasefire. They say it could be drones or something else, but I think it will definitely involve military personnel. In the event of a ceasefire violation, the U.S. could deploy F-35 fighters, Tomahawk missiles, and similar systems based in NATO countries. Sources report this, noting that preventive strikes by the U.S. are unlikely, but the U.S. intends to defend its interests in Europe and will do so. This situation has changed significantly for Trump compared to spring this year. At least CNN reports, citing the White House, that Trump is ready to introduce a bill to Congress that would outline security guarantees for Ukraine. So the first reports are appearing. Let's keep an eye on them. Bloomberg also writes that the U.S. is preparing another round of sanctions against Russia's energy sector if Putin rejects a peace deal with Ukraine. That's Bloomberg. But by evening, Reuters refuted this, saying that at the moment the White House is not considering a new sanctions package against Russia. Because if that were true, sanctions against Lukoil and Rosneft haven't even fully taken effect yet. These are threats, but they already significantly change the situation inside Russia, despite different rhetoric. It's no coincidence that the head of Trump's administration, in her scandalous interview I told you about this morning, said that Trump understands that Putin wants to take full control of Ukraine, all of it. He will not limit himself to the territories currently disputed and talks about freezing the war. Therefore, I personally conclude that the deep state, okay, not Trump personally, but the deep state, will not allow Russia to expand westward. And NATO's budget, by Russian claims, already stands at $2.7 trillion, which is a very serious figure. About $1 trillion, around $900 billion, is the U.S. budget. The rest is Europe. Finally, things have started moving. It took a long time, but once the flywheel is spinning, it won't stop quickly. Now a bit more about sanctions against Russia. What does Bloomberg write? The U.S. is considering various options, including striking Russia's so-called shadow fleet. There was already information that Trump allegedly authorized strikes on the shadow fleet, though I would treat this very cautiously. The outlet says that strikes on the shadow fleet could indeed become a serious reason for Putin and the entire Kremlin elite to change position, and they understand this in Russia. Indeed, as Mr. Fisenko aptly noted yesterday during our wrap-up broadcast, Lavrov hasn't commented on anything in recent days. He's nowhere to be seen. That's very telling. Lavrov was present in Anchorage during the Putin-Trump meeting, what I call the Lavrov-Trump meeting. The spokespeople have changed, though Lavrov may reappear. Now, another energy issue that will significantly hit Russia. Europe needs to eliminate this. Today, the European Parliament voted to ban imports of Russian gas and liquefied natural gas. By the way, France buys a lot of it. According to the draft law, imports of Russian LNG will stop at the beginning of 2026, literally in 2 weeks. Pipeline gas supplies will be gradually reduced until September 30th, 2027. Unfortunately, that's longer, mainly the southern route. Russian gas no longer flows to Europe via Ukraine's GTS. The document also provides for penalties for operators who violate the new rules, to be enforced by EU member states. The bill now awaits approval by the EU Council, so Europe is waking up. Merz even stated that Germany should also be a guarantor of Ukraine's security. Other countries will join. They have no other choice. They will look for money to maintain a large army in Ukraine. We also discussed this today with national security expert Victor Yahoun on the channel. Worth watching. He shares interesting views as a military professional. Now, friends, briefly about the situation in Ukraine. There are good and not so good updates. On the political front, today, Servant of the People elected a new party leader, an old one. It is Deputy Speaker Oleksandr Korniyenko. Ms. Shuliak was dismissed. She is no longer party leader, though they say she was quite effective. Why Korniyenko? He is a strong political strategist. Most likely, without exaggeration, he will manage the president's election campaign, as there is talk, mainly on Telegram channels, that presidential elections could take place on March 31st, 2026, with parliamentary elections allegedly in the fall. I treat this information very cautiously, but it is being actively discussed. Kornienko's appointment, in my view, indicates that Servant of the People is preparing for elections. We'll monitor developments. Verified information will appear quickly on my Telegram channel. Regarding the presidential election date, it is not yet verified, but Zelenskyy himself says he is ready. Zelenskyy will personally attend the EU Council meeting tomorrow, where a decision on a reparations loan for Ukraine may be adopted. The issue is very murky and unclear. At the front, the situation is as follows. Special Operations Forces struck a field artillery depot of the occupiers in temporarily occupied Luhansk region on the night of December 17th. Unfortunately, Russians attacked Zaporizhzhia with guided bombs. You've probably seen this on social media and Telegram channels. As a result of the strike on the regional center in Zaporizhzhia district, 30 people were injured, including 5 children. Russians also attacked with FPV drones. In the civilian settlement of Kuzhuhum in Zaporizhzhia region, 2 men were wounded. In Odessa region, as a result of previous attacks, a state-level emergency has been declared due to a massive Russian strike on the energy sector. In Odessa city, power is being restored. In Artsys, Odessa region, there will be no electricity until December 26th, according to DTEK. Hopefully it will be restored sooner. People without electricity deserve better. As a result of Russian strikes in Kherson region, 2 people were killed and 2 more wounded. The negotiation process continues. The war, unfortunately, continues, friends. Thank you for being with me. These are all the news I wanted to share at this moment. Late at night, Trump will deliver an address, but I don't think it will concern Ukraine, more likely Venezuela. He is banning Venezuelan oil tankers. There is a separate story in the Caribbean region. Once again, thank you very much. Subscribe, comment. Love you all. Stay with us. Glory to Ukraine.